This is the Texas Nationalist Movement's Legislative Action Workshop. Hello, Saints and Patriots. I'm Apostle Claver T. Kamau Imani of RagingElephantsRadio.com. Today's special guest is author and publisher of Defiance Press, David Thomas Roberts. Before we get to our conversation with our very special guest, I want to remind you of a couple of things. First, if you're in the video conference room, the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A button. Feel free to click on that. We'll be monitoring whatever you enter in there, questions you may have for Dave. And also, this is, I think, number 4 or 5 in a series of conversations that we're going to be having with this Legislative Action Workshop over the next several days. There's many more to come, including at 4:30 this afternoon. After we finish with Dave, we scheduled with State Representative James White. He had a conflict in schedule. We do have to keep in mind that we're heading into a legislative session in just a couple of weeks. And so it's kind of crazy for these guys, especially when you get into pre-session filing period. So State Representative James White rescheduled today at 4:30 Texas time, right after we complete with Dave. So we'll have a short break. And remember, once again, you have to have that special, unique link to get into that conference room. It's the same with every session for the LAW. And you go to tnm.me/TNM-law, TNM-LAW, and you can reserve your seat for any of the remaining conversations for the workshop over the next several days. Also, tonight, really what I would consider to be the main event of the Legislative Action Workshop, it's going to be at 7 o'clock with the panel discussion on the Alamo situation. Texas Nationalist Movement's very own Daniel Miller is going to be a featured panelist, along with former Land Commissioner of Texas, Jerry Patterson. It's going to be at 7 o'clock tonight. If you want to get in on that, you have to go to the website. You have to register. You have to have that link sent to your email inbox. And that's the way it is with each and every session for the workshop. Yeah, it kind of clutters up the inbox, but that's the way the platform works. And actually, it's the best way to do it. So you can go to tnm.me/TNM-law and get that done. Also, any of the previous sessions you have missed of the workshop, all the videos are posted at tnm.me. And with that, David Thomas Roberts, how are you, my man? You're looking dapper. I don't think I've ever seen you look so dapper, man. I mean, good grief.
I said this group without I did not have my cowboy hat. No, I was in meetings downtown in my technology business, and so, I'm dressing the part.
Well, I'm usually the best guy, the best dressed guy in the room, but as far as this video conference room is concerned, I'm playing second fiddle for sure. I'm sure there's some video attendees that are in their pajamas. I used to do my program in my pajamas, even naked, until video was required. You're looking good, Dave. What's going on, man? Look at that. And you've got your latest work there of art, publication, literature in the background. Maybe we should start with that. It looks beautiful.
Thanks. That's Purge on the Potomac that came out a couple of months ago, and I'm still doing the nationwide tour on that, so we're having a lot of fun with that. I've spent, for those that follow me, I've been in D.C. a lot the last 2 months, which is another conversation completely. But part of this book came out of a visit that I had at Washington D.C. 2 years ago with a Federal Election Commission's whistleblower who still hasn't come out yet, but it was interesting.
Dave, okay, look, are we assuming when we talk about the importance of building relationships to advance the legislative agenda, are you specifically talking about legislators?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to meet Trump. I've met, working with the Freedom Caucus in DC, know a lot of people here in Texas. And a lot of these relationships, and I know Daniel wanted me to talk about this a little bit, and so how I've cultivated some relationships with some of these legislators, and some of it's about money, but it was done even times when I didn't have money. So I know that's part of what we want to talk about. I assume, correct?
Yeah, it is. And my jump off point is this. I can understand that building these relationships are important, but just from a psychological point of perspective, challenge, when these guys do so many knuckleheaded things, when they do so many rhinoceros things, how does one get over the fact that you're talking to someone who doesn't necessarily stand on the same political ideological ground as you do and build this relationship? I guess you just have to be bigger than the challenge ahead of you, that's before you.
I think the first thing, and one of the things that's always been important for me, is I don't deify these elected officials. In fact, you rarely hear me call them elected officials. I call them elected employees. So realizing that they put their pants on the same way I do, I assume, and that I'll give them a little bit of credit because they decided to take on service, which is a little bit different than being a career politician, which is one of the things that's another subject altogether to figure out in with these legislators what their ultimate goal is. Some are there actually to do a service and are there for a temporary time. Others, it's unfortunately with the Texas legislature, there's a lot of people there that are building upon a political career, and that's the first stepping stone. So I think the first thing that's real important is to realize that these guys and gals, I get a little nervous with some of the worship that's going on with these guys. I mean, yes, they won some elections, and yes, they're civil servants, but they just put their pants on like you and I do. And I try to have just real conversations with them. A lot of them don't react real well to threats. A lot of them don't act real well to, a lot of the political discourse today is you see people going in and doing some of the things that you see on YouTube and Facebook where they're challenging people in restaurants. Now, I'll tell you, I'll get up and go meet somebody I see at dinner who's an elected official, and I may challenge them on something, but I'm not rude about it. And so I think part of it is just realizing first step is these guys are just like you and I. They just happen to have won an election. That's all.
Dave Roberts is of Defiance Press. All right, so Dave, I was kind of giving you a hard time about your attire for today, but dude, is there an anticipation of the elected official that those who approach him or her do present a certain type of picture, not merely just being rude, as you see the left doing in restaurants, chasing people out of restaurants or harassing them in airports or at town halls, etc. But there needs to be a sense of decorum and some sense of polish if you're going to have a relationship just because of who they think they are.
Yeah, and you got to realize that when you're meeting one of these guys or gals for the first time, they're trying to size you up also. They're like, is that person a potential donor, political donor? Is that person got a wide sphere of influence? Basically when they're looking at you and I, they're wondering what can we do for them? And so you have to, first of all, conduct yourself as if you're respectful of their time, without deifying them, but respectful of their time. That doesn't mean that you don't bend on your principles. It doesn't mean that you don't you give in on your beliefs. I think they actually respect that. But I think that when you're having conversations, and I think it's important to go meet with these folks in their offices in Austin, in their offices in DC, but especially in Austin, or at their local offices where they have local offices, and go meet them and tell them what your concerns are. And I think that for most of them, they'll listen to you. And, they want to listen. They want to hear what their constituents have to say. You just have to, you may have to be persistent, okay? But there's a difference between being persistent and being rude. So, but you need to be heard. That's the main thing.
All right, so the conversation is about building a relationship. Do you want to try and see if you can go as deep as socializing with them? Hey, let's go out and get a burger together, or go out and get a beer or something like that, if it's legally allowed. I think in the state of Texas, you can do such things, but if it's a federal elected official, you can't even buy them a cup of coffee. I don't think the federal election laws allow that. But do you want to try and pursue that if you're hitting it off with someone, or is that out of bounds?
And I think that part of the basics of building any kind of relationship with another human being is try to find common interest. So if I go meet a legislator that's the hunter, I immediately have something that for me that we have in common.
The golfer or
yeah, anything you find in common. Maybe do a little research on the person you're going to go visit or go talk to before you do it, and see if you can find common ground, so you know what to bring up. You may even know some of the same people, but you may have some of everything from high school football to hunting to some bill that they had sponsored.
Good icebreaker.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just you think it's common sense, but it's not always common sense. But if we go in there, even with legislators that I have been extremely disappointed in and actually fought against, I don't start those conversations that way. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to win people over. So, and some of them, it's very hard. I mean, it's very, and I won't name any names, but I'll just tell you, it's very difficult with some of them. But
that's what I mean. When they've done such terrible things as so-called representatives, when they've taken terrible votes, when they've actually been obstacles for legislation of liberty to get to the governor's desk, you have to swallow deeply sometimes to approach them and build those relationships with the ultimate objective always in the forefront of your mind, trying to bury the enmity the best way you possibly can, Dave.
That's right. But listen, I will tell these legislators or any politician if they've done things that I don't agree with, but I'll tell them why. And a lot of times we're just going to agree to disagree. But maybe we don't agree on one issue, but there's another issue that can help with. Or there's another issue, for instance, we may not agree with a legislator or some bill that they passed. But if he's on board with protecting the Alamo, we have something in common, and I'm going to pursue that with him. That knowing that the other may be a lost cause. So it's not always about the idea is to win the war, but you may have some battles, small battles with them that you're going to lose. But the idea is to win the war overall.
Dave, before we go on, I want to remind all the video attendees, conference attendees, that at the bottom of your video screen, there is a chat room for you to participate, and we'll be monitoring that for any of your comments. And more specifically, there's a Q&A button. And when we're looking for your questions for Dave in that box as well, in that window as well. Dave, any anecdotal stories, maybe from your own personal experiences, or something that you've heard secondhand, how relationships with those who hold public office really have made a difference? That sometimes it's not the petition drive, sometimes it's not melting down the phone lines or crashing the server with emails. It's the conversations, the personal, making the personal contact with those that have been elected to be our employees, our public servants. You have any stories of?
There's one that's very recent that comes to mind, Claver, but it's a national. So Jim Jordan, who's one of the founders of the Freedom Caucus, if y'all recall a few months ago when the word came out that he was going to run for Speaker of the House or for the majority leader with Paul Ryan stepping down, That's when you saw the attacks come up about these Ohio State sexual abuse issues that people claimed that he turned his back on. And so I had just met him, been introduced to him through Ted Cruz and some other folks, and they and I got there for you. One thing I always try to get people's cell phone numbers. So you'd be surprised if you ask them for it, you can get them. And Jim Jordan had given me his cell phone number, and I don't abuse that, by the way. But when at the height of all of this that was happening to him, I sent him a text that said, "Hey Jim, just praying for you. We support you down here in Texas. We don't believe any of the crap that we're hearing, and just wanting to let you know Texas stands behind you." And you know what? Now I have a regular conversation with him all the time. He's been very helpful in some of the research I've done. He definitely thinks like most Texans. In fact, you could transplant him here and he would fit right at home. And really good friend of Chip Roy out of Fredericksburg. And so that's just an example of just something like that. Sometimes just letting them know that they have some political cover, so support goes a long way. It's not always the dollars. It's not, always being loud. It's just letting him know that, hey, me and my family are praying for you. We don't believe any of that stuff, and we stand behind you. But we went a long way.
Kara in the Q&A window asked this question to you, Dave. How would constituents go about having the opportunity to sit down with their legislators? Or even those that are in the executive?
Well, I think that you have to, with the legislators, you have to call their local offices. You got to show up at events and introduce yourself to them at events that they're speaking at or events that they may attend. And most of these guys and gals, if there's anything going on in their districts, I don't care if it's a bake sale or a rodeo, a chamber of commerce, go to those, introduce yourself to them so that they can start associating a face with a name, and then make appointments with their staff to go see them. So sometimes you may have to go and meet with their staff a couple of times before you ever get with them, but you have to start somewhere. So for us, we started meeting with staff first. And then as we met with staff and they figured out that we weren't lunatics, then we started climbing the ladder and really starting out locally, with those folks. And they all have offices locally, so you can arrange a meeting. And there's no smart legislator that's going to turn down a meeting with constituents if they know they're sincere.
You don't have too many unpleasant interactions with them either. They don't necessarily get rude. If there's a difference of opinion on a piece of legislation that you're speaking with them about, or the possibility of even a referendum here in the state of Texas, you don't want to let things get out of hand, and rarely should they get out of hand from the legislator or the lawmaker's behavior, Dave.
No, I've gotten up and excused myself out of meetings that weren't going well. I'm not the kind that won't, I will tell somebody how the cow ate the cabbage in a nice way, hopefully. But, and there has been meetings that I've had actually in Austin at the state capitol where I've had to walk away. Or for instance, we've had instances where, and this has been quite a while, but just folks that knew I was part of, supporting some other type of legislation that they didn't want to be confronted on it or asked about it, wouldn't even see us. But those weren't typically ones that I was a constituent. They were from other districts. But I've never, and everybody's different, but I've never had problems getting a hold of the ones that represent me out of my district. And that's usually where I start.
Now, are you representing an organization? Are you building this relationship as someone who represents an organization or several organizations or an advocacy group, not necessarily TNM, it could be another one? Or are you approaching these relationships simply as a citizen?
You could just go as a citizen. However, that being the political animal that these folks are, they're going to want to know, they're going to try to figure out what your sphere of influence is. And if you're part of an advocacy group or part of a business group or part of anything that's got numbers behind it, they're more inclined to meet you. Absolutely.
Let's see what's in the chat room here. from email. As someone who had never really networked with my reps, what is one thing I can do to get the ball rolling? Well, I guess it goes back to just start. Call them up, send them an email, a message on Facebook, something like that, Dave. There's multiple ways now to get in contact with pretty much any representative that you want to get in contact at whatever level. You can direct message them or send them a message on Twitter, certainly a message on their pages on Facebook, and you can certainly call either their Austin office or their in-district office. There's someone there 12 months out of the year usually.
Right, and you may start with just calling their district office and asking, what's on the legislative agenda, what is the that person going to support, what's at the top of his list. Then do a little research on those items and the ones that you feel like you need to be heard. And listen, you need to come in there with one or two things. They're not going to spend 3 hours going through the whole legislative agenda, but figure out what your hot topics are. And after you've done a little bit of research, then make those appointments after you've already gotten those from the staff.
And when you've worked so hard to get those appointments, sometimes one will walk in and they are expecting an hour meeting, an hour and 10 minute meeting or something like that. And especially during a legislative session, you may be fortunate if you get 20.
Yes, that's correct. You're not going to take their whole time, rarely. And so a lot of times when you're setting that appointment with the staff, just let them know you're only wanting 15 minutes. And if they give you 15 minutes, only take 15 minutes. You have to be very disciplined, because if they start looking at you, somebody's going to come up and eat their time up. You'll never get another appointment.
From the chat room, I was told by a legislator that handwritten notes go a long way for first contact, if not a face-to-face. And also, after the meeting, a handwritten note, a thank you note. I mean, George H.W. Bush, the late George H.W. Bush, was famous for the handwritten notes and 25,000 address on the for Christmas cards. Dave. Yes,
a thank you note after you've gotten a meeting is really important. That's something I would highly recommend. And regular correspondence, even if it's that way, just you're not going to meet with these folks likely every week or even every month. But I think that, one of the things that I've seen that's effective to do is start assembling some like-minded individuals and having your own mini town halls. Because if you talk to a legislator and say, listen, I'm going to have 15 people over at my house. Can you come over here and talk to them about these two bills that are sitting in Austin, and we want to talk to them. Now, whenever one of these guys hear numbers, okay, that's what registers. So if they get an opportunity to go talk to 15, 20 people, they'll go do it. And
it doesn't have to be the Republican Women's Club. It's just you and 20 of your friends. Don't necessarily even have to be a part of an organization. They're going to come just basically on the possibility of probably finding a couple of new donors.
Exactly. Coffee and pound cake, it goes a long way. 15, 20 people. And, how hard is it to get, you can get 15, 20 people over to watch a football game or do a barbecue in your backyard.
I mean, don't tell them 15 or 20 people and you don't have 15 or 20 people. If you say it's 15 or 20 people, come through.
Right. Absolutely. And then again, the same rule works. If you want to come in and just say a few words to our group and talk about these two issues, and then you can be on your way. And they're not going to come spend the afternoon with you probably. Unless you got a really nice place and, who knows.
And there really is a football game and barbecue going on. They'll hang around for something like that. So, Dave, this legislative session coming up, what are you going to be focusing on? It's only 140 days. The first 30 days of the session, they really are mandated by the Texas Constitution to do nothing but pretty much sit up there and twiddle their thumbs.
Well, I'm going to be looking real close at the budget issues that they've got going on. The Alamo is a huge deal for me. It's at the top of the list. So that's another issue. Somebody's got to act on this, and we got to find legislators going to carry the water on this. And obviously, there's always the Independence Referendum. That's always on the list to talk about. So You can find plenty of things. I own several businesses, so the franchise tax issues are big. The property tax issues are huge. The school district, the way schools are funded is huge. So believe me, there's plenty to discuss. There's also things about following federally mandated orders, the border. I mean, my goodness, out of that, you can definitely find plenty of things to talk about. And then, if you call those district offices ahead and get what some of the legislative agenda is ahead of time, you can get specific into the House bills that they have and figure out, which one of those things that we need to be looking at. I'll tell you the truth, and Claver, you've probably done this, and I know Daniel Miller's probably done this too. When I've gotten a list of some of the legislative agenda from those district offices, there's items that were on that list that I had no idea were on, and it raised awareness immediately. And we started, networking and saying, hey, do you realize that this is actually coming up for a vote? Can you believe this? They need to be heard. And we've changed things before we've changed bills or killed them before they ever made the floor. So it's important to know what they have coming up.
Dave, you're not focusing only on the representatives in whose district you live in. I'm thinking you will talk to other representatives.
Oh, I've gone and met with them. Absolutely.
And they receive you well, although you're not a constituent, because there may be those out there who have had the experience of calling a U.S. congressman or a U.S. senator or state senator or state representative, and they may get that question from whoever answers the phone. Do you live in the district?
Right.
What is your zip code? As if to say, in a subtle way, we really don't care about your opinion. You're not even a voter in our district.
Well, if you keep in the back of your mind that when you call these out of district legislators or state senators, that you're immediately going to get on a donor list for them. Okay, so the fact that you've called them, that you're interested in talking to them. You could be a future donor, whether it's $5, $50, $5,000. That's part of the reason that I've seen that they'll talk to others. But they're also trying to get a sense of which way the political winds are blowing on certain issues. So, a lot of them will talk to you. There's some that, the former speaker would never take one of my calls, but and his staff knew to block me. But that was only because I opposed most of his issues, not because I was ever rude to him or jumped up and down.
He blocked pretty much the entire state of Texas. Doing the will of the people was necessarily his forte.
Right. Correct. So, there's a lot of it. And sometimes there's been instances, fortunately not so much in my district, but I've found other legislators and state senators and other districts are more friendly to the ideals that we might have, and are willing to listen to us and carry water for us on the floor in Austin, where your direct representative may not. So it's all about finding the folks that will fight the fights that you want them to fight, and hopefully it's the ones in your district, but if it's not, you gotta cultivate the other ones.
We have a saying around here: the defense of liberty begins in your own backyard. Don't neglect the county judge, the county commissioners, the mayor, city council people, your school board, elected school board members. Maybe a whole lot easier to build a relationship with them. They may be sitting in a pew next to you, or their children and your children may be going to the same school. You never know.
Well, that's a great point, Claver, because I originally, some of the relationships that I built were at the county level for me, and then those folks had introduced me to folks at the state level. So you're right on track. Politics is all local. It's where it all starts. And so if you can get to know your city councilman, your judges, your county judges, your mayor,
the power of a county judge is underestimated. They will an amazing amount of constitutional power, Dave. And talking to them, they steer a lot of cash in a lot of directions. They're the ones that usually have the biggest purse strings, at least when it comes to the big urban districts. And the same thing with the county commissioners, an immense amount of executive power.
And don't forget the local sheriff, because the local sheriff has they're also extremely influential. And so where we built a lot of relationships locally here in Montgomery County, it led to other relationships that we met because we developed the local ones. So it may be easier to start with somebody locally. But it's not that big a deal to make an appointment to go talk to the staff, at least, of your in-district representatives at their offices that are local to you. And that's a great start.
A lot easier to go to the city council meeting or to the county commissioner's court, say a few words, maybe even a compliment when they do things properly, when it's public comments on the agenda. That's a great way to sort of break the ice from a distance, if you will.
Well, and those, it's been my experience that many of those events are not well attended. So if they see you there consistently, again, it's all about being seen. And like you said, if you can say a few words, and if there's, if they do anything well, compliment on them, compliment them, and do it publicly, and it will go a long way.
The attitude towards doing this with judges sometimes is poo-pooed, but they are political figures, especially here in the Lone Star State where they are on the ballot. I'm thinking it's not necessarily unethical to build these types of relationships with those who wear black robes, justices of the peace, state district court judges, especially in the rural areas where there aren't that many. Here in Houston, you got 80 or 90 judges or whatever it is. And they certainly are political when election time comes around. They certainly are asking for your endorsement. I'm thinking that it shouldn't be frowned upon building these types of relationships. We focus on the executive. We certainly focus on the legislators because they are the ones that are more accustomed to being lobbied, whether by professionals or by citizens. But building a relationship with the little G gods in black robes is just as important. They want votes. They want donors too.
Right. And the only reason they wouldn't meet with you is if you had a case in front of them. So, which would cause conflict problems for them. So other than that, it's the same process. They have a staff also, calling the staffs and they get elected also in Texas. So, any end that you can get into your local political culture usually gets you introduced to other areas. And even with the Republican Party, with the party system, sometimes that's the way to meet folks. I know Daniel Claver, after elections, if you stick around and become a delegate, we had a bunch of people that became delegates this year that had never been a delegate before. So, it's just getting involved. It's maybe watching one less football game on a Monday night that's not your city that you could care less about. Instead having a cup of coffee with your state legislator.
There's a friend of mine out of Austin by the name of TJ Scott, and he is just a precinct chair. And I fondly, lovingly call him the most powerful and most influential precinct chair in the world, because he literally has the highest elected officials in the state on speed dial. But more importantly, they have him on speed dial. He's a precinct chair. He's not wealthy. He's just involved. The elected officials know how dedicated he is to the body politique, the cause of liberty, and in this case, the Republican Party. And you'd be surprised at how many times they call him. What is the grassroots saying? What's happening in Central Texas, deep down in the base. And that's, I think, Dave, I think that's when you really know the relationship is there, when they feel comfortable talking to you, that they are relying on you to be a resource, and you're telling it to them like a TI is. You're not going to blow, any sunshine where the sun doesn't shine. And that's when you really know that you've broken through and there's a true relationship. They will call you, David.
Right. And, I've done things, and I wish this was original, but it's not. I've done things like I'll buy these little pocket constitutions or pocket Declaration of Independence, and I've actually, delivered that to some staff offices and said, look, I've got a note attached to it, House Bill X doesn't coincide with Constitution. Here's my number. If you want to call and talk about it, so they've, there's little things like that that you can do. You just be creative.
But the pros do that, especially in Austin, where those types of things are actually legal by TEC rules. I mean, you walk into the office of a legislator, and there's the receptionist, and you see a bowl of M&Ms on the desk, and you reach down, and it doesn't say M&Ms on it; it has AT&T on it.
Yeah,
things like that. Or I remember being in the legislator's office on the first day of a session, and the lady was a lady with a big cart was just rolling past each office, dropping off some sort of, big box of goodies, and the legislative assistant comes in, oh, hi, how are you? Gets the box and drops it in the pile underneath the table over there with the other box of goodies that have been dropped off by lobbyists. The pros do that. So that little note, the little pocket constitution, it's a little bit more meaning than a bowl of M&Ms. But this is the kind of thing that they're accustomed to, Dave. We should practice the same techniques, perhaps.
Yeah. I was at a University of Texas football game, and I saw a group coming out of a suite, and there was a state senator I knew real well. It was in Comcast suite.
Now, I can tell you some story about lobbyists, and I've seen it with my own two eyes. About people know that our legislators, even the lieutenant governor, only makes $600 a month, and you have to wonder, well, why do they put up with what they put up with? And it's the perks that they get and the pension if they make it so many sessions, so many terms. But we're not advocating for that. But the idea of relationship, these guys go to the extreme as far as professional lobbyists are concerned. But it doesn't hurt to break the ice some sort of way, Dave, without being unethical.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's actually delivering a message, giving them a constitution, say, hey, this is why I don't support this. And if you support it, you're violating Article 2, Section 3 of the United States Constitution. It gets a little more specific, but
not exactly a perk,
Yeah. I think Strauss got about 20 of those from me and never returned one call,
Oh, well, he never returned he never returned our calls or responded to our invitations to appear on Raging Elephants Radio. I wonder why.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then, there's, here's another thing. Okay. So without saying any names, we had a legislator, and I'm not going to say what district he was from, rookie.
We know it's a he. We know that.
It's a he, right? He's a rookie, and he gets elected, and he didn't really have a primary opponent. Obviously, no Democratic opponent, so he's it's pretty much a shoe-in. But he's pretty young, a little green, wet behind the ears. He goes to Austin. The first thing that happens is he accepts $122,000 in campaign donations from Strauss. Now, we let him have it. But we also didn't do a really good job preparing him when he got to Austin. These kind of things are going to be thrown in front of him. And so basically what happens when they do that is they're bought and paid for then. So it's, we didn't groom this guy before he got there to resist some of that temptation. So
it's shocking.
That's how these guys do it. When you got somebody like Strauss who's got a $4 million war chest, they're able to use those election funds to go and entice other legislators as they come into Austin and to do their bidding.
And it's surprising how many of the winners have that level of knowledge. They literally do not know what's going on underneath the pink dome and are susceptible to that type of buyout. Just as we close up, Dave Roberts of Defiance Press. What do you think about Dennis Bonnen potentially being the next Speaker of the House? Your impressions? Have you had a chance to?
I haven't met him, but all the reports I'm getting from people that I trust like him, and he's a big improvement from Strauss. There are some issues, but it would be a huge improvement over Strauss.
But he was Strauss's Speaker pro tem. I'm a little bit suspect. I mean, there's several things that I've got to see a change on. First and foremost for me is I don't want to see 1/3 of the committee chairmanships going to the jackasses, to the Democrats. That's one thing. That's one of the things that irked me from the very beginning with Strauss. You're just giving away power when the people of Texas have basically rebuked and repudiated the Democratic Party and its policies, and you just give away power like that. I certainly want to see a reconstitution of the Calendars Committee, if not a complete elimination of the Calendars Committee. And I certainly want to see the rules amended to give more power to the majority, especially in the House of Representatives. And, as far as the House is concerned, those are some of the things that I want to see the change as far as the leadership moving immediately, that they can, hopefully we can get some more liberty-driven legislation to the floor for debate.
And Clay, you're right on point with all of those. And we've actually, that calendaring issue is huge, because we've seen really, really good bills never make the light of day, never get out of committee. They would have gotten the support, but the calendar gets manipulated so that they never get out of committee. So the calendaring, and if the message that was sent by the voters is to send with the Republican majority, and in the interest, what Strauss would always say is he was doing that and allow Democrats to have a voice in the interest of professional interests. These guys got to work together. There's got to be compromise on both sides. But we didn't send a split House and a split Senate to a split legislature to Austin. There's a reason why it's a Republican majority, and I've never understood. Except that, we all know Strauss was a Democrat at heart, and it just came through all the time. So
my theory has always been that I think I sort of introduced this to the political nomenclature of Texans, especially when we launched Raging Elephants Radio. Our form of government here is really a plutocracy. And that's where the rub comes in, where you have the will of the people versus the will of those who write the checks for those guys to be up there and earn a pension in perpetuity. And I think that's really where the real rub comes in, Dave. All the time we get that stiff arming, like for on the issue of the bathroom bill, let's say, for instance, right, where you saw the business community openly getting hyperbolic about the economic damage that it would do. And the other arguments that they put out there, they were absolutely vapid and not credible at all. I think that's part of the rub that we see here in Texas, Dave. Your thoughts?
I agree. And you'll see this, and it'll be hard not to really, really get upset. But there's been countless, and I know, Claver, you've had this too, countless times where you're talking to an elected official who believes that they know more than you do, and that their opinion is more important, and they have more facts about a particular issue than you do. And that's one thing that really gets my blood boiling. I think sometimes, not all of them, some of them will underestimate your knowledge about a certain subject. And so you are going to have those percentages that will be in there to be like that. I think Strauss was always like that. And I could name a handful of state senators and legislators that I've spoken to that are like that. So you've elected them, so they must be smarter than you. And I found most of the time that is not the case.
Just to circle back to end everything up, Dave, just this legislative action workshop proves to me, just those who are on the agenda, the elected officials that are scheduled to appear with this workshop, I think says something extremely positive about the Texas nationalist movement and how the elected class sees the organization now. It's the preeminent organization on the planet that promotes and advocates for Texas independence. I think it's fair to say that there was a time when having associations with anyone who was attached to the TNM could be considered political poison. The organization could be considered a third rail. No longer. I think it was Jim Lantroop up in the Lubbock area that actually ran on the idea of having a referendum, said he was actually in favor on the campaign trail of a referendum, binding referendum on independence. I think it says a lot to the evolution of Texans on the idea, and also the evolution of TNM as an organization. And I think because of that, the idea of us building relationships with those who are members of the elected class, the water is a whole lot warmer. They are a bit more welcoming. They can see the advantage and the issues that TNM stands for beyond just an independence referendum, but true liberty principles like property tax, like the DREAM Act, like border security, the franchise tax, and other critical economic and social cultural issues. Just your final thoughts about how the TNM is now, in some cases, it could be said without exaggeration, are being embraced by the body politic here in Texas, and the advantage we have in building the relationships that you came in to talk to us about today.
You know, it's come such a long way, Claver. I marveled at the GOP convention in San Antonio this year, the TNM's booth and how many people were at that booth. And really, I hate to say it, but the fact that the GOP even allowed us to have a booth there, but you saw that coming with the delegates and the GOP and the plank committees, and we've been doing it. We're going to have to continue to do this one legislator at a time, just like the organization's been built one person at a time, and we're definitely headed in the right direction.
David Thomas Roberts, anything about Defiance Press? Any new titles that are coming out pretty soon that the avid, rabid book reader should be looking out for?
Well, you got my political thriller, Purge on the Potomac. There's obviously Texas has been an incredible success, and hats off to Daniel Miller for that book. It's so well written and so well received. That's an incredible book. We have Dumb Politics, which is written actually by my youngest son, which is geared to the millennial generation. That releases January 15th. It's called Dumb Politics. And then we have, I've got a major nonfiction coming out on tax day, April 15th. And it's called The Death of Liberty. And it's about how the progressives and with the use of the income tax have destroyed our liberties. So, are you looking for manuscripts, David? Yes. We've got a lot going on with those. We got Ruby's Prayer, which is one of our back titles, but is in movie production right now. We've got I can't ever say it, apocalyptic book called Black Autumn that's written by two special forces guys. It's incredible written. It's also it's a bestseller, and that one is being looked at for a movie too. So that's so we got some great authors, some great titles. Our titles are lean very conservative and very Texas centric, and we plan to keep it that way. His name is David Thomas Roberts. He's an author and publisher, Defiance Press, based right here in Texas, in Montgomery County, just north of Houston. A great portfolio of authors and titles, and it's great to have someone like David Thomas Roberts on our side of Texas Liberty here. I want to thank you for attending today's conversation, the Texas Nationalist Movement's Legislative Action Workshop. Just a couple of reminders before we say goodbye just for a few minutes. Just let me say right now, 4:30, we scheduled
State Representative James White. He'll be with us. He was originally scheduled for 2 o'clock this afternoon. Had a scheduling conflict. He has been rescheduled for 4:30, just about 40 minutes from now, just short of 40 minutes from now. So if you want to attend that conversation, you need to go to tnm.me/tnmlaw, TNMLAW, and register to have a seat in that video conference room, and we'll send you the unique link to that video conference. That's going to happen at 4:30. Tonight at 7 o'clock, the main event, the panel discussion on the Alamo and that situation. Featured guest will be the TNM's very own Daniel Miller and former Land Commissioner of Texas, Jerry Patterson. And I'm going to have a whole lot of fun moderating that one. I want to also ask you to download the Raging Elephants Radio app. You can find it in your App Store and Google Play, absolutely free. Beat the censorship. It's our way of getting trustworthy, Texas-centric, liberty-biased news and commentary directly to you without having to worry about the censorship of big tech. Or, of course, sign up for the Raging Elephants Radio newsletter, our email list. Thanks a lot, Saints and Patriots. We'll see you at 4:30 Texas time, the only time that matters, and 7 o'clock this evening as well for the Alamo discussion. Go to tnm.me/tnmlaw for the full schedule of conversations for this workshop over the next few days. I'm Apostle Claver T. Kamal Imani, the Christian politician, your ultra-conservative soul brother. My enemies under the pink dome call me the purifier. And from Houston, may the Lord Jesus bless you. May the Lord Jesus bless the future independent, sovereign republic of Texas.